break out your harp or lyre or whatever David plays, because David is here and we are talking about music, specifically all the music stuff in David. The narrative lectionary brings us to First Samuel, nope, Second Samuel. Oh, there we go, and Psalm 150. So sorry, First Samuel, we're skipping that whole David and Goliath bit. It's good stuff. You should read it. Second Samuel drops us into David as king. So we miss all the David Saul drama, but we get David dancing, a little bit of music going on here. Adrienne, what's happening in this portion of the narrative lectionary, and how are you diving into whatever you're cooking up for your sermon?
Yes, so the tradition, I think, would have us focusing in a different way on David this week. But we are actually in a really interesting place in our church because we're having a transition in our music department. So at the end of this reading, there is this description of David dancing before the Lord with all his might. And then, of course, the reading is paired with Psalm 150. The final psalm in the book of Psalms is all about making a joyful noise. And it has one of my favorite verses, which says, everything that has breath, let everything that has breath praise the name of the Lord. So as you open with, there's cymbals, there's harp, there's lyres, there's a great diversity. And I think for Riverside Church, that is a real important hook. We are an interdenominational, interracial, international church. And so all of the instruments are played here because all of the people are here. And so we're going to actually have a dialogical, conversational sermon on Sunday. We're going to involve our interim director of music. He's going to play some music for us. We're going to talk about, what's the difference between classical music and spirituals and gospel? What are our favorite hymns and why do we love them? What sound, if Riverside Church were a hymn, what hymn would we be? Those kinds of questions. Because we're going to be making some choices that are going to have an implication for us for the next several decades as we do a search for a music director, and I think understand ourselves as a creative and musical community.
You know, I think this is the perfect place for this text to take anyone, maybe not anyone quite the specificity of what we're doing, but I mean, yeah, this is the introduction to David, but this is not the first time in David's narrative we see him dancing before the Lord. So apparently, there was the way that leaders were supposed to behave, and then there's David doing something a little different. So why do we always fall into the rut, and by we I mean churches in general, of our music always is just the way it always is, as opposed to let's have the freedom and expression to try something different and be creative and dance before the Lord. Not to mention that list in Psalm 150 of, trumpets, lutes, tambourines, dance, strings, pipe, clanging cymbals, loud clashing cymbals. All of it needs to come into this liturgical space. So I love this intersection. I think it's an invitation for all preachers to think about the routines we're stuck in and the diversity that we need to sprinkle on top. And I think what we're doing at Riverside is going to be a whole lot of fun. Alan described himself as he'll be a cocktail organist for this Sunday.
Yeah, yeah. So we're gonna throw some things at him, but I actually had a meeting with our interim director of music yesterday, and he's like, if you could give me a playlist in advance, I'd really appreciate it. And I said, yeah, because when I say, hey, Alan, can you play that Snoop Dogg tune? And he just went like, and I said, I don't know any Snoop Dogg tunes, so that's not going to happen. But we'll map it out so that he knows what's coming. What I think we want to do is share some things about what music is intended to do in worship, and like the sermon and like every element, it is intended to transform, it is intended to invite, it is intended to form us and inform us about this God that we claim. It's intended to comfort and to challenge. And you remember, Jim, when we met Marcus Borg many years ago and we were serving another church here in the city, he said to us that most people's faith is formed by music. As much work as we put into these sermons every week, what people are humming when they leave, what they're humming on their deathbeds, what they're humming in times of challenge are songs. They're reciting Psalms like the 23rd Psalm or Psalm 150. They're probably not reciting our sermons as much effort as we put into them. And so the music matters, the music that we choose, the way that we put music together and serve up a buffet. So another metaphor that we're using is this notion of food. How do we nourish our congregation with the selections that we choose? How do we introduce them, like we introduce our children, Jim, to other tastes and other cuisines? Like, can we introduce something from a different century or a different flavor, a different language? So all of those things we are exploring here at the Riverside Church, because we have a diverse community, but also because our God is in this psalm inviting us into diverse sound.
I mean, just think about if you only hear one sound or style or aesthetic in music in a place of worship, what image of God does that convey? It just solidifies God is this because the music is the soundtrack that just fills us consciously and unconsciously. I mean, and theologians have known this. This isn't new. I mean, Martin Luther rewrote pub tunes to theological lyrics, and the Wesley brothers probably spend as much time writing music as they did preaching sermons. And we probably all know their hymns more than we know their sermons, unless you're a Methodist, maybe. But I think there's something to that. The focus on the music. Fosdick, his great hymn that we sing here at Riverside still.
Yes.
I can only tell you a couple of his sermons that I've heard in history, but I can tell you his hymn. We sing it all. So, yeah,
You should probably say what hymn that is. I'm trying to pull it up right now because people are probably going, "What hymn
God of
did
grace
Fosdick write?"
and God of
God of
glory.
grace and God. That was
Glory?
Harry Emerson Fosdick. Yes, glory. I really loved what you said about the Wesley brothers and Luther and how they took from the secular world and pulled that into church. What you reminded me of is the way Ray Charles took church music and
Yes.
set that to him
Ooh.
to music and used it in the clubs like blues music. And so there's always been this uh, cross pollination or
Yeah.
porousness between the church and the world. And I think that's something that we also want to talk about in the sermon. There are songs that are sacred in communities that are not considered church music. And so, what is the split or what is the marriage between what we call sacred and secular? And are there things on Broadway or are there things on the radio? Are there things that our kids recognize that we could bring into worship so that they, like you said, see God in a way that they recognize?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you go to any how many times you have to see Rent and hear just the opening piano riff to 525,600 minutes and be like,
Yes,
this is more than just music. This is something spiritual here, wrapped up in this narrative about humanity. Oh, I mean, I was running a marathon the other week because I do crazy things, and like at mile 13, a song comes on, and it's just like, yes, we're all just pumped and filled with the energy of the music. That's more than just a sound. That's something spiritual connecting all of
absolutely.
us, and yeah, there's something sacred in it, even if it doesn't come out of a hymnal.
Absolutely. And we want everyone that is in God's house on a Sunday to have that experience at some point. We've served in places where the senior minister would say, everything that you hear musically in worship might not feed you, but the goal is that no one goes away hungry. And I think
Yeah.
that's a beautiful sentiment for a church
Mm.
that's multicultural like ours. Everyone's going to eat. You might not eat everything that's served up on the table on Sunday, but no one's going to go away
Yep.
hungry. So that's the conversation that we're trying to have. What can we do to expand music so that more of God's people feel loved and fed in this place
Yeah.
called the Riverside Church? And
And,
maybe
and
we're doing it
imagine.
fine, but we just want to have a conversation about it.
I love it. I don't know. This is obviously where I love thinking about church and music because, it's one thing. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to think, oh, I found God in this hymn that was clearly written about God. But when suddenly you take this thing that you encounter in another part of your world, I imagine like music at a gay club. To bring that into a worship space to say that's also sacred. We're gonna acknowledge that those experiences you have in those places outside of this box called church God is there too. And that's also a sacred church space for you. And we need to do that intermixing and merging of, deconstruct this made up line between the sacred and the secular and recognize the holy. The bush has always been burning, the ground has always been holy, God's in all these places, whether we're looking or not.
That's right. God is in all those places. And again, we've served in places, you and I, where that has been highlighted, where, Lady Gaga, Born This Way, is in church. This Is Me from The Greatest Showman has been sung in my previous church in Brooklyn. And people do feel seen and
Yeah.
loved when the music that they think is never going to show up in a holy space like a church or a cathedral actually gets played, and it's like saying welcome home. It's like saying I see
Yeah.
you, you are welcome here and you're safe here, which is part
Yeah.
of our mission statement is to welcome folks and to say to them you're welcomed and you're loved here.
Well, this is going to be a great Sunday at Riverside.
I
So
think so. I
you
hope
all
so.
you all better show up in the room, online. Take your pick. If you're online, we're going to have a way for you to share and engage with the music that you've found meaningful. So we'll get to hear from all of us who are gathered in person or online. So definitely join us this Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Come to the building right up there on Riverside Drive, Upper West Side, West Harlem, or just trcnyc.org. And I think for every faith leader, I love the way you're approaching this text. I mean, yeah, it's this mashup. We want to have this conversation in this moment, and the text really gives us a springboard. But I hope that preachers don't just go David, 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 but we can look at David dancing, and we can see the diversity in what's praising the Lord, and it can kind of give us an invitation to reflect on our own liturgies. And are we doing? I don't know. I love this. Is a good exegetical move you're making here. I love it.
I love it too. I hope I can say I love it next week. I hope it goes well. I think it's going to be fun. I think anytime that we get to have a theological conversational sermon with our congregants, I think it's a good Sunday.
Yeah.
Because we're all doing theology, right? They've got thoughts and
Yeah.
insight and wisdom, and I intend and expect to learn as much from them as I hope to share with them. And I think that my wisdom and thinking meeting their wisdom and thinking is going to help us
Yeah.
arrive at something really beautiful.
So wait, what was the question we're asking? Let's just ask it here as well. What's the music that?
Yeah, I would say what is your favorite hymn or church song and why? Why is it your favorite? And what we're trying to get at is not just I like this piece, but what does it do for you? What emotion does it evoke? Because if you tell me Leaning on the Everlasting Arms is my favorite hymn because it brings me such joy. What I would then want to do, and what I think our interim director of music would want to do, is say, there's so many ways we can do joy. There's so many hymns, there's so many songs, there's so many instruments that can evoke joy, and we can help to expand your palette on what joy looks like. It doesn't have to only be the thing that you're used to. I want to, like you said, sprinkle some other things in there, garnish your plate with some other opportunities. And if you say, I love this because my grandmother used to sing this song, well, what's underneath that maybe is comfort, is hospitality, is welcome. Well, let's, take hands and walk over here and see if maybe we can find something else that tastes like hospitality and welcome and comfort. That's where I think the fun comes in, because we've got this director of music, interim director of music, who knows some things that we don't know. But then we've got these congregants who know some things that we don't know some old hymns that maybe haven't been in the Riverside canon. So maybe we can stretch that. So we're going to play together and, have some volley and exchange and see what we cook up. I just think it's going to be a lot of fun if we let ourselves go. Yeah.
We in our house, our 3-year-old is not allowed to say he doesn't like something until he tries it. It's like, no, Lauren, you have to taste it. Then you can say yuck or yum. Because we're
Yeah.
like, you might find your favorite food, you just didn't know it was
And you
here.
just didn't
And
know it.
that's what this is too. We all got to taste it before we say yuck or yum and hear the
That's
story
right.
behind it. And yeah.
That's right. And I will say in our house, you had to taste it 3 times
Oh,
because what I said
we'll get
to
there.
what I said to my kid was, well, that person might not have made it very well, right? Or it might have been off, or you might encounter someone who knows how to make it better or add some garnish that you like. So then then they would say, okay, mom, so I'm trying this, and this is my third time, I still don't like it. I'm like, okay, so you're good. And to this point, to this day, they're, got a teenager who still will try things. I'll give it at least 3 shots.
Maybe
Yeah,
we'll move towards that once he can. Yeah, yeah. I do
maybe a
most of
little
the
bit
cooking,
older.
so he's all stuck with how I make things, but it's going to be good either way.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, Sunday's coming. Everybody, share your responses, favorite hymn, church song, and why. What is the connection? We'd love to hear from you. Other thoughts on David, music, diversity. This is going to be great. But really, you all know what you need to do is join us for worship because every Sunday is spectacular. But I am truly excited for just what is going to be cooking this coming Sunday. So I'll see you on Sunday. Boom.